At my sister's wedding, I was given a plastic chair by the kitchen. Her fiancé said, "It's just for plus ones." I looked around and found everyone else had a seat, even my ex. So I picked up my gift, turned around, and said, "Plus one this." She ran after me in front of everyone. I, 32M, thought I'd seen the worst of family dysfunction until my sister's wedding day. What happened there changed everything between us, and honestly, I'm still processing whether I went too far with my revenge. The tension started building weeks before the ceremony. My sister had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. I'd accepted that dynamic years ago, but her fiancé brought out something different in her. Something cruel. When I received the wedding invitation, I noticed it was addressed only to me. No plus one. I called to ask if I could bring someone, and my sister told me that seats were limited and they had to be selective. Fair enough, I thought. Weddings are expensive. The morning of the wedding, I drove 3 hours to the venue with a carefully chosen gift, a crystal vase set that had cost me nearly $400. I'd put real thought into it, remembering how my sister had always loved elegant home decor. Despite our complicated relationship, I wanted to show I cared. The ceremony itself was beautiful. I sat in the third row, watching my sister in her stunning dress, genuinely happy for her despite everything. The reception venue was impressive, an upscale country club with panoramic windows overlooking manicured gardens. That's when things went sideways. A staff member approached me as guests were filing into the reception hall. She apologetically explained that there had been a seating mix-up and asked me to follow her. I assumed she was leading me to my assigned table. Instead, she walked me past all the elegantly decorated tables, past the dance floor, and into a side area near the kitchen entrance. There sat a single plastic folding chair. I stared at it, thinking there had to be some mistake. The noise from the kitchen was overwhelming, clattering dishes, shouting staff, the constant hum of industrial appliances. The smell of food prep mixed with cleaning chemicals. This wasn't just a bad seat, it was insulting. My sister's fiancé appeared beside me, straightening his tie with a smug expression. He told me this was where plus ones and overflow seating were arranged. He said it casually, like he was doing me a favor by explaining the obvious. I looked around the main reception area. Every single table had proper seating with white linens, centerpieces, and place cards. I could see distant relatives I barely knew sitting at prime tables near the head table. Co-workers from my sister's job had better seats than I did. Then I spotted her. My ex-girlfriend was sitting at table 7, laughing with people I didn't recognize. We'd broken up 2 years ago, and it hadn't been pleasant. She'd cheated on me with someone from her yoga class, and the whole thing had been messy and public. Yet there she was, at a proper table with actual chairs and a full place setting. The pieces clicked together. This wasn't about limited seating or plus ones. This was deliberate. I felt my face burning as I realized other guests were starting to notice my situation. Conversations quieted as people glanced over at me, standing next to the plastic chair by the kitchen. Some looked confused, others seemed embarrassed on my behalf. My sister's fiancé was still standing there, waiting for me to sit down and accept this humiliation quietly. He had this expectant look, like he was enjoying the moment. I realized this had probably been his idea from the start. Something snapped inside me. I walked back to the gift table, retrieved my carefully wrapped present, and returned to where he was still standing. I told him he could plus one this, turned on my heel, and headed for the exit. The reception hall went dead silent. 300 people stopped talking mid-sentence. The only sounds were my footsteps and the distant kitchen noise. That's when my sister came running after me. She was calling my name, her dress rustling as she hurried across the venue floor. Her carefully styled hair was already coming loose, and her makeup was smudged from emotional tears. She caught up with me just as I reached the exit doors. She begged me not to leave, saying it would ruin her day. She insisted it was just a misunderstanding, that the seating chart had gotten mixed up. She promised they'd fix it right away if I'd just come back. I looked at her directly and told her we both knew this wasn't a mistake. I said she'd made her choice about how much I meant to her, and now I was making mine. I handed her the gift and told her to enjoy her marriage. The drive home felt surreal. My phone started buzzing with texts before I'd even reached the highway. Family members were asking what had happened, why I'd stormed out, whether I was okay. My sister was sending increasingly frantic messages, alternating between apologies and anger. By the time I got home, the story had already spread through our extended family. My cousin called to tell me that after I left, the reception had continued, but the mood was completely different. Guests were whispering about what they'd witnessed. Several people had asked my parents directly what was going on. My parents called that evening, demanding an explanation. They said I'd embarrassed the entire family, that my sister was heartbroken, and that I'd ruined her special day over a seating arrangement. They couldn't understand why I'd made such a scene instead of handling it quietly. I explained what had really happened, about the plastic chair, about seeing my ex at a proper table, about the deliberate humiliation. My mother went quiet. My father started making excuses, saying maybe it had been an honest mistake, that wedding planning was stressful. But I could tell something had shifted. They were starting to question the narrative they'd been fed. Update 1. The fallout continued for weeks. My sister called multiple times, each conversation following the same pattern. She'd start by apologizing, then gradually shift to defending her fiancé, then end by blaming me for overreacting. She insisted that her husband-to-be wouldn't have done something like that deliberately, that I was paranoid and jealous of their happiness. The turning point came when my aunt reached out. She'd been at the wedding and had witnessed everything. She told me she'd spoken to other family members who were equally disturbed by what they'd seen. Apparently, several guests had approached my parents during the reception, asking if I was okay and expressing concern about the seating situation. More importantly, my aunt had overheard a conversation between my sister's new husband and his groomsmen. He'd been bragging about putting me in my place and making sure I knew where I stood in the family hierarchy. He'd specifically mentioned that having my ex there with better seating was the perfect touch. My aunt was horrified. She'd always suspected my sister's fiancé didn't like me, but she hadn't realized the extent of his manipulation. She admitted that she and others had noticed how my sister had changed since they'd been together, becoming more dismissive of family members who didn't fit his image of success. Armed with this information, I decided it was time for the nuclear option. I compiled everything, screenshots of my sister's contradictory messages, details about the seating arrangement, witness accounts from family members who'd been there. I put together a detailed timeline showing how the treatment had escalated over the months leading up to the wedding. Then I sent it to every family member who'd been at the wedding. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends started reaching out with their own stories. Apparently, my sister's husband had made snide comments to several people over the past year. He'd excluded certain family members from pre-wedding events, made disparaging remarks about people's careers and lifestyle choices, and generally created a toxic atmosphere around what should have been a celebration. My grandmother, who was 92 and had kept quiet about family drama her entire life, finally spoke up. She called my parents and told them in no uncertain terms that what had happened at the wedding was unacceptable. She said she was ashamed that her granddaughter had allowed her husband to treat family that way, and that if it didn't stop, she'd be reconsidering her will. That got my parents' attention. Update 2. My parents requested a family meeting. My sister and her husband showed up looking defensive and angry. They'd clearly prepared their talking points, ready to paint me as the villain who'd ruined their perfect wedding over a minor seating issue. My mother started by asking my sister directly if she'd known about the seating arrangement beforehand. My sister hesitated, then admitted she'd seen the chart but hadn't thought it was a big deal. She said I was being dramatic about sitting near the kitchen. Then my father asked her husband to explain his comment about putting me in my place. The color drained from his face. He tried to deny it, but my aunt had already shared what she'd overheard with my parents. The confrontation that followed was brutal. My sister's husband finally showed his true colors, ranting about how I'd never respected their relationship, how I'd always been jealous of his success, how the family babied me too much. He said the plastic chair was meant to send a message that I needed to start showing proper respect. My sister sat there in stunned silence as her husband revealed exactly who he was. All his charm and politeness disappeared, replaced by contempt and arrogance. He actually said that people like me needed to know their place in the social hierarchy. That's when my sister finally understood what I'd been trying to tell her. The marriage didn't last 6 months. The divorce was messy and expensive. My sister lost a lot in the settlement because their prenup heavily favored him. She moved back in with our parents temporarily, devastated and embarrassed. She'd lost friends who'd sided with her husband, and she'd damaged relationships with family members who felt betrayed by how they'd been treated. She eventually apologized to me properly. Not the half-hearted excuses she'd been offering, but a real acknowledgement of what had happened and her role in it. She admitted she'd known the seating arrangement was wrong, but had convinced herself it wasn't worth fighting about. She'd been so focused on having a perfect wedding that she'd ignored her husband's red flags and cruel behavior. The hardest part for her was realizing how many people she'd hurt in the process. Several family members had distanced themselves from her even after the divorce, feeling that she'd shown her true priorities. She'd chosen her husband's approval over basic respect for her own brother, and some relationships never fully recovered from that. Update 3. 2 years later, things have settled into a new normal. My sister and I have rebuilt our relationship, but it's different now. There's an understanding between us that wasn't there before. She knows I won't tolerate being treated as lesser, and I know she's genuinely changed from the experience. She's remarried now to someone completely different, a kind, humble man who treats everyone in our family with respect and genuine warmth. At their small ceremony last year, I sat at the family table with a proper chair and full place setting. More importantly, I felt wanted and valued there. The plastic chair incident became family legend. My younger cousins refer to it as the time Uncle went nuclear at a wedding. It's become shorthand in our family for standing up against mistreatment, even when it's uncomfortable or costly. My ex-girlfriend, interestingly enough, reached out about a year after the wedding disaster. She'd heard about what happened through mutual friends and wanted to apologize for her part in the humiliation, even though she hadn't known she was being used as a prop in someone else's psychological game. We had coffee and cleared the air. We're not friends, but there's no lingering animosity. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I could have handled it differently. Maybe I could have stayed and made my point without the dramatic exit. But honestly, I don't regret it. That moment of standing up and walking out was necessary, not just for my dignity, but for my entire family's understanding of what acceptable behavior looks like. The gift I took back that day sits on my mantle now. I kept it as a reminder that respect isn't something you should have to beg for from family. It's something you should be able to expect, and if you can't get it, sometimes you have to demand it. My sister's first husband tried to contact me last year through social media, probably fishing for information about her new marriage or looking for some kind of reconciliation with the family. I blocked him immediately. Some bridges are meant to stay burned. The whole experience taught me that family loyalty goes both ways. I'd spent years making excuses for treatment that I would never accept from strangers, simply because we shared DNA. That plastic chair was a wake-up call, not just for me, but for everyone who witnessed it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst behavior. By walking out that day, I forced my sister to confront who she'd become and who she'd chosen to surround herself with. It was painful for everyone involved, but it was also necessary. The revenge wasn't just the dramatic exit or the family confrontation that followed. The real revenge was showing everyone, including my sister, what self-respect looks like in action. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to gain back your dignity. And sometimes, that plastic chair moment is exactly what everyone needs to see.